Alright, there we go. How's it going? I've been gone for like 2.5 months. Where have I been? Working and organizing. Lots of stuff. Including this is my camera bag, which contains a GoPro, which I have a funny story about that with Yellowstone in space, but that's another story. True story though. Not making that up actually. But anyways, what we're doing today is we're talking about three things: awesomeness, custom Xpresso nodes, and thinking particles. And I figured in a tutorial in 2.5 months, I've been trying to for the past month, just haven't had the right thing, but now I do. And I figured why not make an awesome tutorial to break it back in with some cool new tips that I've discovered the past few months. And this isn't like the last tutorial either. There's a lot more to do. I just haven't gotten into them, and it's hard to make tutorials when you're not in the habit of making tutorials. But without further ado, let's look at this and see what we're gonna make. So it's not the most amazing design. They pop up really fast, but they look nifty. So go ahead and look at that one more time. And what it is thinking particles. They are emitting an object which you can't see because it's hidden, and we use some dynamic to make them pop up the way they do. And now we can close out a QuickTime and look at how I do this. So here's the scene, and we have this landscape geometry. We have this particle with a geometry object in it. We have sweep NURBS with the true object, which connects all of the thinking particles. We have a background and a sky for lighting. We have 3 lights right here, and some thinking particle dynamics. Now, our thinking particles here, you might look at this and say, wait a second, I don't know what that is. That's an X group, but aren't X groups supposed to hang other nodes? I don't see any nodes. Well, they can, but you can also do something where you right click and click on standard or locked, which will also set it to standard. And then you have inside of said X group, like right here, you can have ports on the edges, which is absolutely a fantastic tool. But we will get into how to do that after we talk a little bit about the other 2 topics, and really that's just one topic. But we're going to show how to build this scene up, and then how to make a little Xpresso node out of this scene, which we can then copy and paste into other scenes. Very useful. So let's go ahead, and last thing, I do want to talk about awesomeness. I discovered something really cool. So we have these right here, and if you right click on this and say put it at the default sphere, that's cool, but let's put it at like a rounded soft shadow cube. Now wait a second, that's not pointing the same way it was earlier. Did anyone else notice that? I'm sure you did. Let's go ahead and look at this, and well, we'll be positioning it. I found that out last night. It's so cool. You can reposition these by right clicking and dragging. So if you have, say, not with soft shadows, and you want to reposition it, because I've always wondered what that actually looked like from a different, go ahead and right click, and it looks really cool. And then you can look down here, and I mean, this is a little weird because it has a gradient, but that's okay. And the rest of these look really awesome. So anyways, that is awesomeness for you. So now let's move on to the thinking particles. So let's go ahead and make a new scene. We're going to start with a node called TP particles. We're going to right click and add an Xpresso tag. We're going to leave it at that for now. So let's set up the rest of the scene. Let's create a new object. It's going to be a landscape, spherical. Fair warning, by the way, we might have small children running in screaming at any moment. On vacation, visiting family, and I hear a lot of screaming upstairs. You've been warned. So what I'm doing here is setting up this landscape object so that it'll have kind of a nifty shape. So let's see. 0.2. Okay. Perfect. So, anyways, now we have our object. Sorry, I'm distracted by all this upstairs. We have our object, and we're gonna click on it, hit C. That creates, editable mesh. And what we can do now is go ahead and I have it right here where we can center the axis, axis center to center of the geometry. So go ahead and hop into the Xpresso editor, and we're actually going to write a landscape as well. This is a different tutorial I did, as we're going to do here the same technique, but it will apply all the same, and I will teach it. What we're going to use is the time node and the range mode. We're going to import the time and output it to the range mapper and set it as the global rotation H. And there we go. Okay. Now we're going to click on the range mapper, and it's going to rotate a little too fast. So actually I like that, but if you wanted to slow it down, you could change this input upper. Let's look at one. In fact, we might not even want to speed it up. No, if you want to speed it up, you can use the output up. But in this particular case, we're just going to keep it as is. So now it's rotating, and now step is to cause it to emit particles. So let's go ahead and drag it in. Setup right here has the Xpresso editor and the Xpool, Xmanager, and Thinking Particles all right here. So if you wanted to find out how to get this, or you can right-click New Node and go down to like Thinking Particles. We're going to go ahead and start with P-Storm. The rest is going to be found in here. Let's go ahead and add a P-Shape, P-Set Data, P-Size. We're going to drag these two dynamic, or P-Shape and P off to the side. We're not using them yet. P-Wind, P-Gravity. We're going to have P-Pass, Thinking Particle Pass, whatever you want to call it. For Thinking Particle Helper, we're going to add a surface position and a volume position. Then we're going to drag them down, drag the landscape over here, and then back to Xpresso and go to Script and grab a coffee script. Now, oh goodness, this is fun. So we're going to change the user interface by hitting Control Tab and then space once. We have to go back to the view. Here. Not working. I have a user interface that usually is able to set up that way, but here it is. We have the view, Xpresso editor and everything, but no clutter on the sides, and then it has layers and all that. It's handy. Anyways, let's go ahead and set this up. We're going to take the P-Storm and output the particle birth into three things. The set data, we're going to put it into the surface position and the volume position. And then we're going to take in an object as well. And that will be the landscape object for the volume and surface position. Let's go ahead and show the names on the ports. There we go, nice and clean, kind of. Okay, now we're going to output the position into vectors, but we've got to make sure that these inputs on the coffee node are vectors. We're going to make a vector, another vector, and an integer. And we're going to output, I believe, a vector. Let's check it out and see. Yep. A vector. Now let's clean this up over here. One thing I have problems with is literally I have like Xpresso OCD. If it's not perfectly straight, I freak out. But let's go ahead and input the positions into input 1 and 2. And what we have here is a setup that's actually taking the position and it's taking the volume position and the surface position and adding them together a little lower down here. So anyways, we're gonna fix that, and that's because the code, whoa, don't move, okay. The coffee node is basically taking the inputs of these two positions and adding them together, but that's not what we want. Let's go ahead and look at this. Now, if you haven't done coffee before, don't worry, this is really simple, but let's go ahead and start by adding comments. So let's do 2 backslashes right next to the shift button on the right hand side of the keyboard, and say check enter value to determine what emission type to use. And by that I mean if integer is 0, emit from source. If integer is 1, emit from volume. And then go ahead and make it happen. So if input 3 is equal to, that's equal signs right there, 0, then close parentheses and open brackets right next to the P. They have the same thing as these right here. You just shift right above the return or enter button. And inside of there, we're gonna say output 1 equals just 1 equal sign. Input 1, I think. Let's look. Yep. And then we're gonna do a semicolon, and that'll end the line. Then we're gonna copy it and put it right down here. Whoops. What did I do? I deleted something. There we go. There we go. Always with the deleting of stuff. No bueno. Anyways, now we have input 3 is equal to 0, but we want to make that 1. Then output 1 should equal input 2. So what this, whoops, is that if the input is 0, which we're going to use user data for to create a cycle, then output 1 is equal to input 1, which would be the position of the surface position. But if it's if input 3 is equal to, then we're going to say, hey, we want to use the volume position, so we're going to output that instead. And that's right here. Let's go ahead and hit execute. That'll first of all save it into the actual script and then check for errors. And we have no errors, so let's go ahead and use that. And let's, under thinking particles, click, or not right click, sorry. And it's not under thinking particles, it's in the object menu. Look at my startup. Right here, this node, manage user data, the TP node. We're gonna add a group and call it options. No exclamation mark. Then we're going to add data, and it's going to be type of an integer, and then we're going to use QuickTab radio. And if you have before, I have other tutorials showing how to do this, but I'll show how to do it again. What you have is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and whatever numbers you want. And that's the integer this will represent. And then you do a semicolon, and then represent it with a name. So surface position, then another semicolon, volume position, and we only want those two. And then if we have surface position selected, our integer is 0. If volume position selected, our integer is 1. So now that we have that, we're to say, or name it emission type, and drop in and drag this down and output that. Now, lots of words right there that were very non-descriptive, but hopefully that made sense. What was taking the thinking particle node and dragging it into Xpresso and outputting that user data right into our coffee node. And now that we've done that, we can go ahead and control what emission we have from right here. And right now it's the volume position, and now it's the surface position. And now let's go ahead and go back in and grab the PStorm node and drag in the landscape object. We want to control the position just because I don't like any loose ends if something's not working or something bugs out. I want the position of the PStorm always to fall back to the landscape. Now we're actually particles positions. I gotta stop doing that. Changing the particles positions with the P position and P volume position. But if something did happen, I would like it to come landscape node. We're gonna do a birth type of shot. Leave it at 1. The life variation or life speed 15, I guess. 360 for the X and Y, and 0 for the X and Y side. And really that's all the settings we have right there. That's all we need. Let's add 2 more nulls. Let's call TP gravity and TP wind. And drag in gravity and wind into our thinking objects we have up here. And again, if there's any chaos upstairs that you can hear that's distracting, I apologize. I don't really have much option though. Okay, we're going to drag those under the TP object, and then we're also going to add a cube. I hold shift when I add these objects to make them children of the current selected object, or we can add them as a parent option. So let's go ahead and right click, delete without children, so we have our normal cube. Let's make this 20 by 20 by 20. One thing I wish I had done earlier was fillet, and let's look at that. It's a little big. Let's leave it at 5 and 3, and hit C. Okay. Now that we have that, we can add a bit of particle geometry to that. Go in, drag the P shape into shape cube, and let's connect these all to the P pass. Oops. For the P size, we're going to use a quick gradient over age and set the particle size to 450 with a variation of 60%. And we're actually going to keep it at white and then gray, black, and that'll be maybe 26 or so, 25, and that will kind of and then shrink when it comes out. So what that is just what you can see right there. Let's go ahead and make that value say 15. They're very small now, so pop fast and then emit. And I do want them to look like this, but we're going to start with a black gradient. So they do come over, but they don't just flash into your face. There. Okay. We have our TP gravity and TP wind objects both pointing to the it's the Z axis. So I don't want that. So let's point them to the positive axis. And we're just going to use the gravity in this case. Let's go in and turn the wind speed off. And decay on the gravity will be 25 for now. What's that? Let's go ahead and set the turbulence for the wind to 120, pressure size to 250. And then that's all we have for that. So let's go ahead and emit it. And then we're going to change the frame rate or frame count to 180. And let's go back final thing, P size. Let's go ahead and add 2 more gradient controls, and one of them with this one is identical to this one, so it's still roughly 15%, and then we go down to 0, so it fades out. so it doesn't actually just flash away, it'll fade out and shrink. So anyways, now we have a very pixel looking fire, and I will be back in just a second. Alright, and I'm back. The invention of the iPad, otherwise known as the temporary babysitter for small children with needs. Right. Oh, I saved again. Anyways, where were we? Now we have our particles emitting. So part 1 of the tutorial is done. You now understand how to emit particles and render them, as long as you followed along and connected the dots in your own mind. It's necessary. And if you still don't understand, just go ahead and leave comments below. But now, we're going this massive confusion right here, which is actually really simple. I've had some Xpresso trees lately that literally take up all of here. So let's go ahead and right click and set the zoom to 100. Okay, let's pick which one to use for the for our I can't speak right now, for our custom node. Let's say we want a node that will actually emit particles the same way. So minus the P sat node, we'll leave that over here, and the P storm node we'll drag out here. I do want gravity and wind. Yeah, let's go ahead. Okay, so let's drag all of this. And let's drag all of these slots right here, just these ones. Right click, create Xgroup. And now that's already set up. But let's go ahead again by selecting them, and we're going to simplify it by dragging up and copying them. And we're going to hold Command to copy them. So we can drag these down here and delete them. And then these can be dragged up top, and these will be dragged down, and these will be selected and created X group. And this X group will need a few inputs. So let's go ahead and start with a thinking particle. The most important is to have a thinking particle input for this current setup. After that, we want what we call a reference object. Okay. And let's go ahead and, oops, let's drag that to this right here. Now we're going to right click up here, port show names. We're going to scale this up so that we can see names. And let's rename port to reference object. Okay. And let's move this over here. Okay, and then I do want to output the thinking particles directly into another thinking particle output, and then drag that into the particle right here. Okay, next we want integer, and this integer is the emission type. Then we want, lastly, object, which will go right here. This will be called TObject, and that's the object that is represented by thinking particles. And we will drag that in E shape as the cube, and we'll make sure that the ports are shown. There we go. Alright, and now everything seems to work. Let's go ahead and make sure it's working up here. We do need to finish everything. Let's go ahead and set the particle birth from the P storm to pass, the particle pass. Let's go ahead and get rid of the P pass node right here. P size we can set up externally, either from right here, which we'll do for now, or at the other end, and we'll just leave it now. Okay. Let's go ahead and set up a landscape object as the reference object. The emission type will come from where it was earlier. We'll drag the cube in and set that as the object for the TP object. And let's make sure it still works. It's acting funky. It always does that. Why does it do that? Let me pause and find out. Alright, for the sake of time, we're just going to simplify this and take all of the dynamics tags and the standard tags for thinking particles that go from the p pad out. And what we're going to do is just leave them connected to the p pads because it's easier that way. It doesn't go through all this confusion and I troubleshoot for an hour to figure out why it's happening. I will figure that out and I will explain it in another. If you have questions, I can certainly answer them, but we're just going to move on. So what we have here is what now works. For some reason, when it gets grouped, the PPAS does not like to play nicely with what we have right here. But now working, we can go ahead and create this custom node. Now what we have right here, Xgroup, I've renamed it by right-clicking and renaming custom thinking particle node. Other than that, I think it's the same. So let's go ahead and right-click on this, and we'll go to View, and then it'll give us this. And this is now our node. So we take in all of this data, and we can output this data. You output and input any sort of data type, but don't for that will not be connected to anything. You're gonna have to go inside and connect that. So, with that in mind, this is our new setup, and it is far smaller and we can go ahead and reuse this as many times as we want. We can also protect it, and we can just name it thinking particles, or not name it, we can set the password as thinking particles, and then no one can go in and control it without having that password. So now we have our thinking particles, and we're going to go ahead and add some materials from our last scene. We'll go ahead and take a look at all of them and how they're done, but we'll just go ahead and drag and drop them in right now. Let's go ahead and set the scene up visually. I don't want to render this. It's not just a technical tutorial, we're also going to look okay. Let's take the room, and what this is just a gradient. It's a kind of, well, let's open the window and I'll show you. It's right here. So I got a bluish tint in the center and black outside, or outlying gradient color. Okay. Then we have specularity, but we'll just knock that off. We don't want that. Yeah, let's go ahead and keep it. It's nice for the visual. We aren't actually going to use it though. Then we have our sweeteners material, which is going to be kind of a yellowish, dark, very desaturated color. Strong on the reflection, and specularity is, I think, a default. The sky object we're going to have is just a like such. Excuse me. And the particles are going to be kind of a light yellow with a subsurface scattering of yellow. And then we have specularity, which is really, really wide and flat. So it's really soft. Let's go ahead and add a sky object to apply the material. Let's add this gradient color to the particle geometry. And then let's go ahead and add a object in just a second to the bottom. Okay, we're going to drag the particle geometry on scene. So in that, I selected the sky object in the background and hit Option G, and that just groups them into a null object. Let's add a tracer object, which can be found under MoGraph Tracer. Let's go ahead and add that. Okay. Then we go back to the Xpresso editor, and where I have the particle settings, you can also go to create. Actually, I think it's simulate thinking particle settings. Yeah. Drag the particle group in, and then we're going to connect elements, or connect all objects, and then we're going to set the type to Akima and adaptive. Actually, no, let's leave it at linear. That's what I had it at. But whatever you want to use. So what we have is this right here, and it looks nifty, but let's go ahead and add, let's option and grab a sweeteners, and then hold shift and add an end side, and change size to 2. Actually, let's just leave it at 1 since small. And then, whoops, wrong one. Let's add the sweetener material. Let's go ahead and look at it now. Looks cool. Let's go into our render settings real quick. We'll set it up. Start with the output, 1280 by 720. Let's output EXRs. And set the filter type to Mitchell. Default light off. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. For the final render, we'll go ahead and use both depth of field and motion blur. We'll set motion blur at 3. Sampler type progress now. And turn on indirect illumination. Let's go to effects, add ambient occlusion. Set the maximum array length to 50 centimeters. Color effect background. And not that we'd be using the background, because what we're mapping is black and white values to 1 if they exceeded, it clamps the values, but that's not going to happen. Let's go to the scene right now and right click on the scene or the sky object and add a compositing tag. Scene by camera turn off, composite background. Not that that really makes a difference, but now we have our scene right there. And let's set up a camera and set the camera at 50 millimeters, and particle geometry is the focus object. Actually, landscape. And we will rename landscape to emitter. Yeah. Okay. Now we have our sweeteners and our particle geometry. Particle geometry, we're going to go ahead and add the particle as well. Not that that's mandatory, just it's nice. Let's go ahead and set things up. Okay. Now they go a little out of camera. There we go. Set it right there. Okay. And let's add all to the scene. Drop our camera under it. Do not hit Option G because it will miss the null in the center of the scene. It'll place it where the camera is. Camera controller. And really what we're going to do is add the same Xpresso tag as we have on the emitter and change the controller to our object that rotates. And change the range mapper so that it rotates very slowly. And we will set 16. And let's go back in, and we're in the physical render. So if you don't have that, don't worry, but we're going to use it right here. F18, 50 for the which is incredibly low for an ISO if you think about it. If you're a photographer, these settings aren't really something you would necessarily use all the time. Camera doesn't even do an ISO of 50. Maybe you would. I know people that use generally 1/400 as their only ISOs. F18 is a very low f-stop. You're going to get a lot of depth, but we'll talk more about that another time. Maybe I'll do a tutorial on how to use the physical camera properly. Let's go ahead and set the vignette 20, chromatic aberration at 5, and check the diaphragm shape. Change the efficiency to 80. Let's go ahead and look at this. Illuminance, I didn't talk about the subsurface scattering enough. I set it as cream, and then I set the path length to 15. And then I went into the advanced settings and I set fast evaluation. Fresnel reflectivity, can't speak today, at 50. Dithering at 30, which kind of scatters things a bit. And index of refraction at 1.13, so it's nice and it goes right into it. Doesn't really refract much. And then threshold 0.15, I mean. And then I did not compute GI contribution. I'm not sure if that makes a difference, though, unless you have coordination on them. We just have indirect illumination, so. Let's go ahead and hit render again, and what you see here is our render. Let's go ahead and add some lights, area light, and hop out of our camera. And grab our area light and rotate it and position it. Scale it up, nice and big. We'll call this the key light. And we will set it to show motion, and we'll use inverse square for the fall off. We'll use area shadows and set the light to be, well, rather orange. Whoops, there we go, okay. And there we go, okay. Let's drag a copy out by holding Command and rotate it. And set it square and scale it down. Scale the actual area light itself down, but I'm gonna make the fall off a little more, and we'll name this the fill light. And we will go ahead and drag this a little behind and rotate. Okay. Now let's set the fill light. Let's set the key light to 85, or actually let's set it at 80. And the fill to 50. And we're going to copy the fill out, and the front fill is what we'll name it, which isn't really the most name, but it works. Then we have object positioned or rotated properly and scaled properly. Then we're going to go ahead and drag it in front and make sure that it is right ahead of the light, or the camera, and let's rotate it down a bit. Okay, and drag the fall off out even more, and drag it back. Okay, and the front fill will be 30% for now. Let's grab all of these and name it lights, and the camera controller and lights can just go into the scene null. You know what, we're going to save this because I keep doing that, and we're going to replace it. So let's go ahead and look at it now. And we hit render with the progressor, and the way it should work with the thinking particles, that when they pop up, they should be bright and luminant. And we're going to go into the scene and change the light, actually the fill light, to be 65, and we'll actually call that the rim light since it's behind, and we'll call this the fill light. And the key light, I want it to be 110%, so the subsurface scattering will really get by it. And let's go ahead and drag the radius out so that it really does take a hit. So as you bright, they are almost luminant. Now let's go ahead and go into the Xpresso edit and do the thinking particle settings. And the TP size, or P size, I want to make it that big for a shorter amount of time. And then slowly kind of scale off noticeably. So we've changed the gradient, and as you can see right here, we're going to have this render and it kind of show up. And you see is that these are huge and they will flash. And we're actually going to just have it scale off. I better re-simulate it. There we go. And that works. That's what I wanted. So now the only other thing I'm going to do is move these lights a bit. Let's hover camera. And grab the fill light. No, let's grab the key light. We have our position selected. Make the fall off larger, but I just don't want the particles hitting it. And then the fill light, or rim light, let's position here. And it's the rim light, so we can just go ahead and make that 80. How that turns out. It's real, but it does work. Let's go ahead and drop it down just a bit. 70. Okay. And let's desaturate it a bit. Grab the key in the and set them both to warm colors, not too strong. Alright, there we go. And let's go ahead and hit play. Okay. Now that we have this done, we can go ahead and hit render. And there's one final thing I wanted to talk about. Oh, right. I'm on my MacBook, so basically I have all of these function keys up top, but you have to hit the FN button to use them normally. But I cheated this week because I've been using Flash, and there's a ton of settings in all of the Adobe programs that you use the keys for. So like F8 or F9 will keyframe in After Effects, or you can use, I think, F7, I want to say, in Flash to create a keyframe. Don't hold me to that, I'm not that good at Flash. But I changed the settings so I can just have them natural. And let's go ahead and hit F1. Okay, well, we're in the main view. 2, we're in the top view. Then F3 would be right, and F4 would be front, and F5 would be all 5 of them. Now this actually is the first, second, third, and fourth view, and what this does is cycle between them, and it's incredibly fast and easy to do this, and I'm so happy I discovered that. So just a thought. And then F7 will, actually F6 will play backwards, F7 pauses, you can hit F to go F and G forward and back frames. F8 plays forward and pauses as well. Shift will go to the first frame, Shift G will go to the last frame. And those are just settings that I think you guys would find useful. And this has been the most tutorial for thinkparticle.com. It's brought to you by Text Edge Effects as let's go ahead and give that some props. Text, c4dtools.net. Okay, right here. So free tutorials. One benefit for me is that I'm gonna go ahead and show you Text Edge Effects, and you don't have to go get this. I'm not gonna stop making tutorials. Just don't buy my products. I don't care if, I mean, I'm glad if you do, but EJ Hassan Frets and I Design, have been working really hard on this, and a really great tool. So if you can go ahead and check that out, we'd really appreciate it. And thanks for watching this tutorial. I will catch you guys later on thinkparticle.com, and have a good day.